Hey everybody, this is The Great Escape, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Redstone textbook. Today we're going to hit Chapter 3, and we're going to look at all of our activators. We're going to talk about all the things that you can use to actually create a redstone signal to put into your devices, and we're going to do a quick kind of like a lightning round of those different things today. So let's get started with Lesson 1. All right, quick first lesson number 1 is our lever. We've been messing around with this in the past couple episodes, but this is a constant power source. But right now it's in the off position, so it's doing nothing, but I flick it on, boom, we get a constant power source going to that redstone lamp or any other things. The only other thing you need to know about levers is that you can place them pretty much anywhere on a solid, non-transparent block like this. For things like half slabs and stairs, you can only place those levers on the top. But that is for the lever. Quick on and off. All right, lesson 2. Okay, for lesson 2, we have our buttons. There are 2 types of buttons. We've got the stone button and we have the wooden button. Now, the main difference between these two is that the stone button puts out a slightly shorter tick, whereas the wooden button puts out a longer one. They're both monostable power sources, which means that the moment they activate, they turn off. So if you click the stone button, you get a pulse, and then it turns itself off. Same thing with the wooden button, but you'll notice that the pulse is about 0.5 seconds longer. The stone button is 1 second or 10 redstone ticks, and the wooden button is 1.5 seconds or 15 redstone ticks. Now, the other cool thing about the wooden button is that it can also be activated by arrow, and if you notice, once the arrow hits, it stays active until that arrow despawns or until you pick it up, and that includes arrows from skeletons as well as from dispensers. All right, so for lesson 3, we're going to look at the first 2 types of pressure plates. We have the stone pressure plate and the wooden pressure plate. Now, both pressure plates give out 15 signal strength of power the moment you step on them, and will remain powerful like that as long as you're on them. Same thing with the wooden plate. The difference here is that the stone plate can only be activated by a player or by a mob. This also works for things like zombies and villagers and whatever. Let's get him off there. Whereas the wooden pressure plate will activate by players and mobs, but any entity that lands on that will also activate that pressure plate. So you can use these for different applications. The next 2 pressure plates are pretty different than our stone and wooden pressure plates. They both activate in the same way when a mob or an entity lands on them, but the weighted pressure plates, both the light, which is the gold, and the heavy, which is the iron pressure plates, react in different ways. Neither one of them put out a 15 signal strength when one entity is standing on the pressure plate like the other ones. They each measure kind of the weight of the objects placed on them and will put out a signal strength based on the number of objects. So if you have only one entity, so if I tuck this down here, on each of these, you'll notice that they each only put out 1 signal strength. So the light pressure plate's putting out 1, the heavy pressure plate's putting out 1. But now if I were to put a second entity, and they have to be actually different entities, if you were to throw another pressure plate down there, they actually bind together and treat as one entity. If I throw another entity down there, you'll notice that the gold pressure plate is now putting out 2 power sources, whereas the weighted pressure plate, or the heavy pressure plate, is still only putting out 1. If I were to add a third entity down here, you see now we've hit 3 and we power that lamp, but on the heavy pressure plate, we're still only at 1. So the rules for pressure plates as they work here, so the light pressure plate is each entity placed on the light pressure plate equals 1 power or 1 level of signal strength. So in order to go out the full 15 signal strength of a line, you would need 15 entities. So if I but here we've got 3, so if I put 3 villagers in here, 1, 2, 3, bam, we got the light on. So this is a great tool to use to measure the weight of the objects. Now, with the heavy pressure plate, one object is 1 signal strength. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is still 1 signal strength, but once I hit 11 entities, I get 2 signal strength. 11, 12, if I can get 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Oh, I must have hit 21. That gives you that 3rd signal strength. So what you need to consider with each of these is that 1 to 10 is 1 signal strength, 11 to 20 is 2 signal strength, 21 to 30 is 3 signal strength. So you've got, so it's kind of a base 10 system with this, whereas this is 1 object equals 1 strength. All right, our next power source is the daylight sensor, which I mentioned was kind of like a redstone torch or a redstone block because it provides a constant power source. You don't have to worry about switching it on or switching it off. But the difference about it is that it's completely powered and based on the time of day. So as you can see here, this daylight sensor is currently powering this this redstone light because it is set onto regular redstone or daylight mode, and so it powers the block. But this one, which is set onto night mode, and you do that by just kind of clicking on it, activating it, is not powering anything. But if we switch over to nighttime, you'll see that they switch. This one turns off, this one turns on. So this is a great way to power things so that you, based on the time of day. So if you want your lights to come on only at night, this is a great way to power it and to keep things in check that way. All right, one important thing about daylight sensors is that the amount of power they give off is based on the level of the light. So in the morning, you can see that it's not giving off a full 15 length power source. Here's that 15 blocks here. It's actually only giving off, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 11 power sources in the morning. But as the sun climbs in the sky, we're going to see more of these power sources go up. There's another. As you can see, the sun's a little bit higher up in the sky. There's another. We're almost approaching noon, and we're not going to get the full signal strength until we get to about noon. I'm going to add another light here like this, because here's at 15, it'll actually power that one as well. And there's 15 there, and as you can see, we are almost right at noon. And so there's a really fancy algorithm for based on how high in the sky the sun is. That'll determine the amount of power that the daylight sensor is going to put out, and it will rise as the sun rises, and then as the sun goes down, that amount of power will also decrease. It will also decrease if you place any kind of blocks over the daylight sensor. So as you can see, we lost a power source there, and the more shadow that you put over the daylight sensor, the more that power source is going to diminish. So it's actually what the daylight sensor, as the name hints or suggests, is doing is it's measuring the amount of daylight that you have in a single in a game. The other thing that affects daylight sensors is weather. So let's get our weather turned on here. All right, and so as you can see, the light level's low because we've changed it to rain and thunder. And so we've lost some of the power here on our daylight sensor, but we've also gotten down low enough in light to bring the power on our night daylight sensor. So our inverted daylight sensor. Now, that's for thunderstorms. As you can see, rain doesn't block as much light, so you still get that, but it does block enough light to turn on our inverted daylight sensors. All right, so our next activator is the tripwire, which is a little unique because in order to work, you need 2 of them, and as you can see, it's not doing anything, and because then you also need string. So you place your 2 tripwires, and then you put a piece of string between them, and that activates our little tripwire mechanic there. And so if I run a redstone signal off of this tripwire, you can see it's putting out redstone, and it's going to put out 15 signal strength, and it can activate things like redstone lamps or TNT or anything else. Now, one of the cool things about tripwire is that you can put them, they don't have to be just kind of this close to each other, you can put them I think the limit is 40 blocks away from one another. The only thing you have to do is you have to put a piece of string on each block connecting them. And as you can see, they activated and it still works. Now, tripwire can be activated by mobs, it can be activated by players, it can also be activated by entities. So you can use tripwire to measure anytime anything crosses through this little gap of space right here in your world. All right, so our next redstone activator is the redstone trap chest. Now, the trap chest is different than a regular chest because when you open the trap chest, it puts off a 1 signal strength redstone signal that you can use to activate, hoppers or other items or even TNT, and you can create a trap, which is why they're called trap chests. But as you can see, they're only putting off a 1 signal. Now, that's not enough to light that redstone lamp, but if I were to put the trap chest directly on the lamp, you can see when I open the chest, it turns on. When I close the chest, it turns off. All right, and our final activator is the observer. Now, the observer is such a unique and special block, and it's so, relatively new to Minecraft, that it will get a video all of its own, but I wanted to include it here because it does activate redstone signal. Now, the way the observer looks, you can see it's got this little face on it, is that when you place something in front of the observer, or you give it a block update, it kicks out a redstone signal. And you can see it kicks out a 1-tick redstone pulse when whenever that block update happens. If I place something in front of this observer here, it's just going to flash through. But now, as you can see, it flashes on when the object is placed and also when it's removed. Anytime there's a block update in front of this object, you're going to create as you can see, a redstone pulse. So these are incredibly useful objects for redstone builds, and they deserve a video all of their own, but I just wanted to show you how the observers worked. Thank you so much for joining us today for this chapter of the Redstone textbook. So we've covered all of our activators. We've covered the dust, and we've covered torches and blocks and all of the objects that we can use to create and transmit a redstone signal. So next episode, we're going to look at those objects that can receive that redstone signal and put out an output. So thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Great Escape, and this is the Redstone textbook. Drop a like and a subscribe if you learned something, and I'll see you next time.